Imagine living next to something you know is
tóxica, tóxico.
Un escándalo.
You see it and smell it every day because it's right in your backyard. At the same time, you're told that no one knows where it's coming from, and they're not sure that it even exists. Wouldn't you be going mad? That's daily life for people living in this idyllic region of Galicia, Spain. Behind the rolling hills and beautiful forests, there's a hidden problem, destroying rivers, lakes, and communities.
And on days like today, the only evidence of it is these weird blue rings.
And it's been getting worse for decades. It affects every continent, and it's almost impossible to hold people accountable. But that might be changing.
Estamos aquí simplemente por una cosa, porque nos tenemos que defender.
Something like this has never happened before in the EU.
Things have gotten bad enough that people ended up here. So how? And who's to blame?
To answer that question, I knew I had to talk to this guy. Manuel Garcia got kind of famous back in 2020 for drawing attention to the pollution problems in his area. He was profiled by Greenpeace, had to fight a €1 million lawsuit. It was a whole thing, but more on that later. First, he agreed to show us what he sees as the root of the problem: the pigs. We're on a back road outside a small town in the region of Alimia in southern Galicia.
So we're passing by farms right now. It's completely forbidden to go inside. And Manuel also said that it could be dangerous.
Estar cerca das súas propiedades e das súas instalacións non lle gusta nada, nada, nada. Traballadores e xente que se ven algo raro, chaman, din unha cámara grabando.
People here are outnumbered by pigs, by around 100,000 to 1. And those pigs produce a lot of waste, which smells.
We just opened the window and it smells horrible.
Pigs produce more excrement than people do, between 1 and 2 tons per year.
Wow, that's a lot of pig shit.
These piles are made up of urine and feces together, which is a common method of storage. The waste can also be kept as liquid in pools to be later applied to fields as fertilizer. That's because it contains nitrates, nitrogen atoms combined with oxygen. They are essential for plant growth, but too much of them causes serious problems. So it's important the waste is properly managed.
Esta construción é bastante reciente e antes todos estes residuos estaban, e non sei se vistes por aí, algúns montóns cando chegamos, estaban tirados polo entorno, sin ningún tipo de precaución, sin estar con unha cuberta que o aislara da chuvia, nin unha soleira, un aislamiento por no fondo, non?
But the biggest issue is that the fields just can't absorb it all. It runs off and ends up in the water, killing what was once a thriving ecosystem.
How did it used to be?
Tremendo. Esto era un paraíso de vida, entendes? É dicir, a xente aquí, cando llevan malas colleitas, se alimentaba do que daba a natureza. Caza, peixes, ras, sabes que son as ras? Crac, 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 nos las comíamos.
Para comer.
Para comer.
Wow.
En las últimas 2 décadas ha sido... Es decir, la mierda, la contaminación se ha ido acumulando. Es decir, han desaparecido las ranas, los peces. No es un río, es una depuradora.
All this new waste is here because of changes in pig farming. Spain traditionally raised free-range Iberian pigs, snuffling around for acorns. That means smaller farms with few animals per farm. But over the past few decades, many farms concentrated under a cooperative model. The cooperative supplies the animals, food, and healthcare. Signing up can lower costs for farmers, but independently, it can be harder to compete. Corin is Spain's largest meat cooperative, operating many Galician pig farms. The company denies competing on price, saying it sells in different markets from local producers. Either way, the number of large pig farms has been growing in Spain and Galicia. Still, this could easily seem like a local issue, except the pollution also migrated somewhere that made it pretty hard to ignore. This is the As Conchas Reservoir, fed by the Limia River. Water from here flows into Portugal and eventually ends up in the ocean. Pablo and Mercedes grew up in this area, and the reservoir was at the center of their lives.
Todo nuestro momento de ocio, todo nuestro momento de esparcimiento era relacionado con el embalse.
Y dejarlos ahí, pues eso es lo que hacía la gente, ¿no? Los niños pequeños jugaban en la orilla, los mayores nadaban, y esa era un foco de relaciones, ¿no?
Now, the reservoir is so polluted that many days it's forbidden to swim in it. One of the biggest problems is the smell.
I just smelled like a really bad smell. Is that the smell that you're talking about?
Eso no es el olor. El olor es ese que acabas de percibir, es multiplicado por 1000. Yo hace muchos años, pues más de 10, que sufro fuertes dolores de cabeza al llegar el calor. Cada vez que abres la puerta o cada vez que abres una ventana o cada vez que entra una persona a la tienda, llega la gente y me dice: ¡Uf, qué olor tenéis aquí! ¿Aquí cómo podéis vivir?
When it's warm, the river also becomes covered in a thick blue-green paste. The color is from eutrophication, excessive nutrients, for example nitrates, in the water that cause algal blooms. The blooms consume oxygen in the water and harm wildlife. When they eventually die, they produce large amounts of carbon dioxide. Water pollution from livestock is diffuse, meaning it doesn't stay in one place. The water looked fine when I was there, but less than a week before it was a bright green.
Si se fija en el árbol, ¿ves esas líneas azules? Esas líneas azules que están en los árboles. Eso es cuando hay un bloom.
I also found those rings when I went to get a closer look at the water. Close up, it was foamy, and there were tons of horrible-smelling algae, but not much else.
It's really easy to see why this pollution is super hard to track down. It's right here, yet you can barely see it.
On top of that, algal blooms as well as nitrates can come from other sources like human waste or agricultural fertilizer. Because the pollution source is difficult to prove, it's hard to take polluters to court. Even so, there have been cases in the UK and US. Now, Pablo, Mercedes, and others are bringing a first-of-its-kind case to the EU, claiming that livestock pollution violates human rights. Because this area is unique, there's evidence. Serafine is a nitrate specialist who analyzed the data from the Alimia Basin and prepared it for trial.
So this is a machine for testing nitrates?
Automatic titration system. This is the sample.
So this would be the water from the reservoir, okay, for example.
For good water, should be below 10 milligrams per liter. Bad water, over 25 milligrams per liter. Not drinking water, over 50 milligrams per liter.
Photos that Manuel sent me showed nitrate levels of 130 and 75 in his town. Many people who live there buy bottled water instead of drinking from their wells. High levels of nitrates can have health impacts and even kill young babies.
Around 10% of the samples are above the legal limits, and there are also records published in scientific journals up to 329 milligrams per liter.
Other toxic chemicals were also found in the water, along with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But Pablo and Mercedes' case also has to prove where it came from.
We can know if the origin of the nitrates are industrial chemical fertilizers, because the isotopic signal is very different from the evolution of the human population and the industrial farming. We are sure that the main origin is industrial farming, 99%.
And what happens next with this case could have implications for the whole EU and potentially around the world. Because industrial livestock pollution is a global problem, and those toxic algal blooms are found on nearly every continent around the world. In the United States, over 40% of rivers, streams, and lakes are polluted by excess nutrients. And just like in Galicia, many also contain antibiotic-resistant bacteria. At the current rate, millions of people could die from antibiotic resistance by 2050. And most antibiotics used worldwide are given to farm animals. Living close together, animals are more at risk for disease, so they're fed antibiotics to stay healthy. The antibiotic-resistant bacteria gets into the water through the waste, but there are regulations to stop that from happening. I went to speak with Jesus Orejas to find out more. He's the head of the Animal Health Service in the Ministry of Rural Affairs, which is in charge of approving new farms and regulating their practices.
A nivel estatal existe en la producción porcina y también en otras producciones ganaderas unos programas de control. Dependiendo de los casos y de la gravedad de los mismos, se puede cerrar la explotación.
Managing livestock and pigs in particular in Spain is a big deal. Spain recently became the EU's top pork producer after overtaking Germany in 2021. And like many countries, Spain exports much of its meat elsewhere, specifically China. but growing an industry that fast can be tricky.
Pero bueno, es un difícil equilibrio entre la actividad legal y posible de una persona que quiere iniciar esta actividad y los requisitos normativos que la administración puede imponer.
There's a court case today that's saying that there are farms in the Limia region that haven't been complying with these regulations. I'm wondering what your response to that is, like what happened?
Good question. No tengo conocimiento del... Sé que existe una demanda judicial, un juicio interpuesto en los tribunales. No he intervenido ni tengo competencias en ese tema, con lo cual no te puedo responder.
So despite the evidence, the government's official position is that they don't know what's going on. But this group of lawyers thinks otherwise. They're litigating the case for Mercedes, Pablo, 5 other claimants from the town, a neighborhood association, and the Consumer Federation CECU.
Estamos representando tanto a personas físicas como a consumidores de agua del embalse de las Conchas, que no es solo una contaminación ecológica, que ya de por sí eso es muy grave, sino que esto puede afectar sus derechos fundamentales, ¿no?
The group is suing the government of Galicia, the River Basin Authority, and 5 municipalities.
So we're here in the courthouse and everybody's about to go in for the start of the trial.
This is the first case in the EU about livestock pollution and its violation of human rights. It claims that the authorities have failed to act to protect people's health and demands a stop to the pollution, restoration of the reservoir, and compensation for the claimants. The case could go all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. It implicates the authorities, but they're not the only ones involved. Remember Corin? They're not mentioned in the case, but many farms in the area are under the company's name. Manuel claims that he saw open waste dumping from a Corin farm, and that the company sued him in 2020 for speaking out.
Tenemos los recursos hídricos de toda una comarca en muy mal estado. Y entonces no le gustaba que lo relacionáramos con esta contaminación. A un político casi que lo puedes insultar, ¿no? Pero a una gran empresa, cuando te metes con sus intereses, parece ser que son dioses. Y bueno, la forma que tienen de callar las bocas es con este tipo de demandas, que se llaman slaps. Y bueno, metieron una demanda por valor de 1 millón de euros.
Other people in the area declined to comment about Corin. I reached out to them for an interview, but nobody ever set one up. They did get back to me with a comment, saying that they had never filed a complaint against anyone. Regarding the pollution, the company claims that all its farms have the environmental permits in order and strictly comply with environmental regulations. And as for the trial, Manuel doesn't have much hope for a win.
Vemos que las administraciones empiezan a reconocer el problema. Esto que ves aquí lo han permitido durante 3 décadas. Tierra de nadie para estas industrias. Los políticos nunca son responsables y siempre los tribunales, los jueces, dictan a favor del poder. Entonces no tengo mucha esperanza, pero tengo esperanza en la gente que lucha.
The others, though, are more optimistic.
How did it go today? What are your feelings about it?
Bueno, yo creo que el juicio ha ido muy bien porque sobre todo hemos traído gente muy buena. Mi sensación es muy buena y espero que por los vecinos de la zona tengamos una sentencia favorable, ¿no?
Hola. How did it go today?
Buena, porque los peritos, nuestros peritos han demostrado que realmente el foco de la contaminación viene de la ganadería industrial, ¿no? Las administraciones nos han dejado solas, hemos tenido que recurrir al método científico.
Spain has already been called out at the EU level for this issue. In January 2024, the EU Commission referred Spain to the Court of Justice of the European Union for failing to take sufficient action on nitrates pollution. The reference, though, wasn't legally binding, which is an objective the lawyers hope to achieve. But as the government argues it's doing its job, and with no comment from the industry, the ultimate decision lies with the judge. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and check out DW.com for more environmental stories.